The battery is low. So, I had planned on streaming around 9, which unfortunately did not pan out. The plan was to include a friend of mine who also has a YouTube channel, Fresh 2000 Pop Culture, if I'm not mistaken, is the name. Um, but for whatever reason, I just couldn't figure out how to make OBS work. I'm not sure what the deal is with that. I'll have to work at it again. Um, so that's why I'm doing the stream now. It might not have been a great idea to do one at this point, given the time, but I wanted to do something. Um, and because of the time, I don't expect many to be available to join in. Um, so that's the deal. Um, Hello there. Welcome to the stream. As is always the case, my streams are focused on this, uh, what is effectively a fan fiction idea, right? But I feel like, given how these streams always have something to do with discussing Iron Man, that it shouldn't negatively impact me to just have a broader discussion about Iron Man. Hear how other people feel about him. Do they like him? Do they have issues with him? Are they more in the on them on a are they more in a middle ground? I of course recognize why there are people who don't like Iron Man, or they like him but they think there's serious problems with his character, or serious problems with him as a person, right? Um, and, it's actually really interesting how I started off being more into DC. You know, watched Marvel related content. Growing up, the the Marvel character that I really liked was Spider-Man. So he was pretty much the one that was my favorite. And I liked other Marvel heroes, but never to the same point, never to the same extent. Didn't really like the 90s Iron Man series. Wasn't bad, just didn't care for it. I found it to be a bit unfocused. Um, but then, of course, decades later, or at least years later, we ended up with the first Iron Man movie. From what I remember, I don't want to say that I was excited by it. I loved seeing the Iron Man suit fully realized as an actual suit of armor, right? Because in the 90s series, it looked more like spandex. The effects were great. I really didn't know a thing about Robert Downey Jr., so I had no opinion on him. I remember my stepfather wasn't too keen on the idea of him being Iron Man, but we went and saw it. And it was one of those instances where you either have low expectations or no expectations, and you end up loving the movie. So, after years of not caring for Iron Man, it was the 2008 Iron Man film that made me a fan. Made me change my tune entirely on his character and see how much more there was to him. And yes, that was largely Robert Downey Jr.'s acting. So then it was like, okay, I still really like Spider-Man, but Iron Man's kind of taken the number one spot for me. Because, as strange as this will sound, I felt a sort of personal connection to Tony Stark. One friend of mine said, "That's ridiculous. You're not a jerk." He is. But the truth of the matter is that Tony Stark never really was a bad man. He was just a kid of privilege, and, he was arrogant and had an ego because of that, right? And then what happens to him in the first movie, it humbles him a bit. And you see that despite the first showing of him being this seemingly being a war profiteer, you recognize that he just builds the weapons. He doesn't understand the magnitude of what it is that he's created. He doesn't understand what these weapons do, right? So it kind of creates this idea that maybe he's been lied to. Maybe Stane, I believe it's Zebediah Stane, is potentially manipulating him and being like, "Hey, don't worry about the weapons. Like, we're building them for defensive purposes. Yes, they are missiles and they can be used to put lives in danger, but that's not what their purpose is." None of that is ever said, but you get the feeling that that's more or less how it went. Stane was molding Tony into what he wanted him to be. And obviously he was going to keep him around because he was the genius. He was the one who knew how to build the things. And then Tony, gets a taste of what it's really like. And it's like he finally discovers reality. My way of looking at Tony Stark is that he is one of the most realistic heroes ever in terms of being a person. Most don't walk around acting like Steve Rogers, where they're presumably holier than thou, like they have no weaknesses, like they're perfect people. But Tony was always flawed, and that makes him so much more real, right? He struggles with addiction, alcoholism. He's got traumas that we see him try to deal with. He can come across as a jerk from time to time, but that's part of what makes him more real. Most people aren't, your, shall we say, fantasy of a goody goody. What makes a person a good person is more so their actions than their words. And we know that when it comes right down to it, Tony Stark is more than willing to do what's necessary to save people. It made him more real for me than Cap ever was. Now, I want to make it perfectly clear that Captain America is another hero I initially had no care for until that first movie came out, which made me a Captain America fan. I used to think he was silly, dorky, just a, average Boy Scout. But that movie really changed my tune on him. And another hero that I knew even less about, that the movies made me feel like I was a huge fan of, is T'Challa, the Black Panther. Made me gravitate towards him. So those three became my favorites. So it's been like a weird relationship I've had with the character of Iron Man. He's also the only Marvel character I've read comics of. As in, like, entire runs, more or less. Not a lot. I think I only read, like, 3 of his storylines. And I don't think I read the tie-in comics, but just the main ones. I've read the one where he has the job of director of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is a very fun read. It's interesting to see Tony in that position. I read Extremis. I recall something about the arc that dealt with the Bleeding Edge armor. That's the armor that myself and I think others believe was the main inspiration for his Infinity War suit. Because the Bleeding Edge armor was an armor that he quite literally stored within his own body, inside of his bones, as like these really tiny pieces, and they could come through his skin and form like a, more like a metallic skin than, it's still, you could still tell it was an Iron Man armor. He did it that way so that he could always draw it out. And so I never saw him as the jerk. I saw him as snarky, but deep down, really caring. When he shows that side that appears to be more of a jerk, it stems from he's curious about something and he wants to test his theories. Like when he shocks Hulk and everybody else is freaking out, he's doing it because he's like, what makes you tick? Like, what makes you transform? Like, what's going on? Yeah, it's dumb for him to risk that, because we know that it doesn't take much for Bruce Banner to turn into the Hulk. But, Tony also doesn't really understand that. It's not me trying to make an excuse for him. It just is what it is. Um, and this is going to sound strange, but I don't really see Iron Man as a superhero. He is one, but he doesn't embody the ideology that makes a superhero a superhero. Iron Man's ideology is more about building a better world and using Iron Man to do that. He didn't build the armor because he decided I need to go around and take down all these criminal organizations that are misusing weapons for destructive purposes. He will do that, but that's not really his thought. His whole thing is mainly building those Iron Man suits to better protect himself so that he can help out from time to time. But he's not just gonna rush in and save everybody. Which again to me makes him more real. Because most people, they're not just gonna go out and try to save everybody, even if they have the means to do so. They're only gonna get involved if they believe it's absolutely necessary. And we see this in law enforcement. We see this in, I would say, even the military to some extent, depending on who's commanding them, right? They don't just go in and do things. No, they only go in when it feels like there's no other choice. That's how I view Tony Stark as a hero. Spider-Man and all of them, they can handle it. It's only when they need the big guns that I'm stepping in. Another thing to me that's incredibly appealing about Tony Stark is that he really does need to be Iron Man to fight. Right? Steve Rogers, without the Captain America suit and shield, he can bring the beat down. Cause he's got the serum, he's got the training, right? He's an expert combatant. Tony is quite literally just a regular man, physically speaking, in terms of what he could do, until he puts on the armor and flies on in. Yes, he does receive some degree of training from Captain America. It even seems implied that he's learning some self-defense in the movies, because when he dons the armor, you see him like throwing a punch, throwing a kick. He does seem to have like a very bare bones understanding of hand-to-hand combat, but again, he's not a soldier, which is what he makes perfectly clear to Captain America. He's not a soldier. And why would somebody who built weapons for the military, who is then terrified by those weapons they built and feels regretful of it, ever want to be lumped in with soldiers, right? Like, from the comics that I read most of the time, his enemies are just personal foes of his. They attack him, so he defends himself and takes them down. Um, these are all reasons why I don't really call him a superhero. He is a superhero because the point of being a superhero is you go above and beyond. You never give up. And he does protect. Even if he's not going around all of New York like Spider-Man does, trying to save as many people as possible. That, again, it also mostly stems from the fact that because of how powerful the Iron Man technology is, it would kind of be a waste of his time to fly on in and handle all that. But it is very strongly implied that he's at least always keeping tabs. Using his resources to make sure that if something really bad does happen, he can step in when needed. And the other thing that's very interesting about Iron Man is not a persona like it is for Batman, like it is for, to some slight degree, I would even argue Superman, and possibly Spider-Man. Iron Man is quite literally just a suit. Superman is my favorite Superman. I'm not sure entirely what you mean by that, but if I understand what you're saying, like I think I do, yeah, Superman is a favorite of mine as well. But I'm referring to the Superman I grew up with from the animated series and the animated Justice League show. Love Superman in that. It's just I could never read a Superman comic because they just make him too obscenely broken for him to interest me. Like, what I love about those animated series I've seen that revolve around him is that he struggles. Yes, he's got all that power, but you get to see him use his head. You get to see that he is intelligent. He is quite the detective in his own right. It's not just about his powers that make Superman such an exceptional hero. It's his heart and his drive, his willingness to never give up. Which is more or less the case for every DC hero, but, you know, not all DC heroes with powers have a weakness that more or less takes those abilities away from them. Like, Wonder Woman, as far as I know, there's no, like, material that would take away her super strength and her flight. Like, she'll always have that. Same thing with Martian Manhunter. Same thing with, just to a lesser degree, Green Lantern, because, you know, his ring doesn't have an infinite supply of energy. He does need to recharge it. But outside of that, like, there isn't really anything that would take that power away from him. Superman is actually, in some ways, more vulnerable than the other heroes. Because kryptonite because he is affected normally by magic, and a being that's more or less on the same level as him, if not a little bit stronger, can really mess him up. Um, but despite all that, I don't really connect with Superman. I mean, I on some level I do, but not as much. Um, I do connect with. I would say I connect with Batman, probably more so than Superman. Um, but yeah, that like I know I'm repeating myself here, but Iron Man and Spider Man, they're the ones that I feel the most personally connected to. Meaning Peter Parker. And that's nothing against Miles Morales. I just don't feel connection to him. Um, because I have things in common with Tony Stark and Spider Man, which is gonna sound crazy since number one, I'm not rich. I'm not an engineer. I'm not some top notch scientist that works for the military and builds weapons and defense systems, right? Um, but I am like him in that I believe technology is one of the ways that the world will be made a better place. And I do believe that having more powerful weapons, so long as they're in the right hands and so long as there are, laws that are clear enough to prevent their misuse, that they are an excellent defense. I'm not talking about nuclear weapons when I say this. I just mean weapons in general. Um, when you have the bigger weapons, others are a lot less likely to start anything with you. Now, I do believe another reason why Tony Stark becomes Iron Man is because he feels vulnerable. And he doesn't want to feel that way again. He feels like he needs a suit of armor to allow him to be a version of himself that he never knew existed. So he's kind of like Batman in that regard, but the difference here is that it's not a disguise. It basically is what gives him something approaching superpowers. The suit greatly amplifies his strength. He's got the repulsors that he uses to fight with. He's able to fly. He's got like missile launchers and such built into it, built into the armor. He's got that computer system that uh, basically handles a lot of the calculations for him. Um, but I still don't know why he is Iron Man. And I know that it sounds very confusing and nonsensical, but with the other heroes, I get it. Tony Stark was never. I mean, to some extent, he does make it clear that he wants to use his know-how to make things better, but I feel like that's not entirely clear. Because he isn't flying around all the time trying to stop every crime. Not that, he would see that as his job to do so. He's very much just I have this for my own personal reasons. And when he becomes an Avenger, yeah, he definitely becomes more of a hero that you would expect. Which is why what Steve Rogers says to him is so perfect, because he's right. Even as Iron Man, Tony has mostly just been kind of selfish. He will get involved, and he will protect people, but his focus isn't on being Iron Man necessarily. It's on righting the wrongs of his past, which doesn't involve putting on the armor. That might be yet another reason why I like him so much, is because he always keeps me thinking. He's that type of hero to where I feel like I don't ever truly know where he stands. Sometimes I might feel like, yeah, he's a hero and he wants to protect people. But other times it's like, well, here he is partying and acting like there's nothing to worry about. And it's only when someone crashes his party that he decides, okay, I have to get involved. I have to fight now. He's far more complicated than I think certain people give him credit for. I'd argue that he's more complicated. I'd argue he's more complex than Bruce Wayne. In a way, I'd argue that he's even more effective than Bruce Wayne, because Bruce Wayne is a crime fighter. Batman is a crime fighter. Iron Man is a scientist who wants to build a better world by making people's lives easier, developing better sources of energy, cheaper sources of energy to help people financially, right? Improving his public image, which Bruce does do, but it's more of a means to an end. It's not because he actually wants people to see him as somebody who's trying to do great good. No, it's more like my real self as Batman, and I need to be Bruce Wayne to do things that I can't when I'm Batman. But as we've already discussed, Tony Stark is always Tony Stark, regardless of whether he's wearing the armor or not. He doesn't become someone different. He's quite unique in that regard. The core remains the same, even though the body is unrecognizable. Going on to a bit of a different topic, though still in the same realm. I've been frustrated for a while now by the fact that no studios seem to have great interest in making an Iron Man game. Given his popularity, you'd think that would have been a no-brainer. And I know EA is apparently working on one, but it's EA. They don't have a good track record. So it does upset me on a personal level because I honestly want an Iron Man game more than almost any other hero. There are exceptions to that, one being Doctor Strange, but it's pretty much just Iron Man. I would love the idea of being able to like upgrade his suits as you play through the game and like maybe like build new weapons for them. You know, that sort of thing. Really get to tinker with stuff. Just be able to like fly around like freely and like almost like a fighter jet take on like aerial enemies right in the sky like an Air Force pilot would, right? The Avengers game did a somewhat decent job with him, but there was still something missing. And I just hope that we get that big budget Iron Man game at some point because I don't know. I'm sure it's just me that feels that way for the most part, but I guess it's the gameplay variety that could be there. Right? Like the various types of weapons that Iron Man could wield. Um Using the scanners on the suit to like predict and maybe even sort of like investigate areas. Um it's in a way what Iron Man can do is almost without limit. And it would get to more or less build your own Iron Man. You'd get to use your creativity, you know? I could see it being in some ways akin to like an Armored Core title where you pick up parts and you see what works best for your play style. Uh, and that would, in my opinion, make the game more appealing. Um, and outside of that, that variety of gameplay that I see being possible is why Doctor Strange is high up on my list of characters that I want to see get a solo experience. Because this is a guy who's read God only knows how many texts and how many books depicting ancient spells and so on and so forth. There is so much potential in terms of gameplay. And Magic can conceivably do anything. Um, so, um, these are some of my thoughts. Um, anyway, that's more or less all I had to say. Um, so I'm gonna end the stream now. But thank you all for attending, and for those who commented. Um, I'll try to stream more at the usual time tomorrow. And have a proper discussion about the main point of this channel as of right now. Thank you all for your support. Thank you for your likes. Thank you to any new subs I may have obtained. And to those who will watch this after the fact, I hope you like what you see. And if so, consider leaving a comment, a like, and subscribing. Until the next one, I will leave you with this. The truth is, I am Iron Man.